The wolves were less than a mile away. And somehow, they couldn't find the horses. Not the tracks, not the smell, not even the sound. Because the horses weren't anywhere the world could reach. October of 1878 began with the sound of a boot on wood. Slow, deliberate. The kind of sound that didn't ask permission to be heard. Clara Vance stood in the doorway of her cabin, hands still damp from the morning's work, and watched the rider dismount. She knew the horse first. Black coat, cropped tail. Darius Hale. And men like him didn't make visits without purpose. He didn't greet her, didn't nod, didn't even look at her. His eyes went straight past her to the paddock. 3 horses, a buckskin, a bay mare, and a young yearling still unsure of its own legs. They stood calm, trusting, unaware that they were the reason he had come. Hale stopped at the base of the porch, adjusted his hat once, like a man preparing to say something final. Then he spoke. Not loudly, not aggressively, just certain. The council had passed a new ordinance. Wolves had taken 4 colts in a week. So now, every animal had to be secured. Not tied, not fenced, secured. Inside a fortified timber structure. Inspected, approved, before the first hard freeze. Clara did the math before he finished speaking. 2,000 board feet of pine, iron hardware, a full crew of men, 21 days. She had none of it. No mill, no money, no crew. Just a shovel, a pickaxe, and 3 horses that were the only reason she could survive here. Without them, there was no hauling water, no plowing fields, no reaching town. Without them, this place wasn't a homestead. It was a grave. Hale knew that. You could hear it in the stillness of his voice. See it in the way he looked at her land. This wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. Before he left, he added one more thing, casually, like mentioning the weather. He reminded her that he had once offered to buy this land, and she had said no. This time, he said, there is no price. Only the deadline. Then he looked past her again, at the flat ground, the empty space, where a barn should already have been. And he smiled. Not with amusement, with certainty. He mounted his horse and rode east without looking back. Clara stood on the porch long after the sound of hooves was gone. She didn't call after him, didn't curse his name, because convincing him was never the point. The point was making sure that when the snow came, there would be nothing left for the wolves to find. She stepped down from the porch and walked to the edge of the cabin, crouched, pressed her hand flat against the earth. Cold, dense, holding together. She picked up a handful and squeezed. It held its shape. And just like that, the problem changed. Not how to build a barn, but how to build a place where nothing above ground
could ever reach. She didn't start outside. That would have been the obvious move, and obvious was exactly what would get her caught. Every man in the valley knew what building a barn looked like. Stacks of timber, hammering, noise, progress you could see from the road. She had none of that. So she gave them exactly what they expected. Nothing. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Clara moved the table, dragged the chair aside, and pried up the floorboards in the center of her cabin. The wood lifted slowly, nails protesting the movement. Then came the first cut, the first strike of metal into earth, and the first bucket of dirt disappeared into the dark. That was the moment the system began. She was not building a structure. She was removing one. The work was precise. She dug from 4 in the morning until noon, always below the floor, always hidden. The sound stayed inside the cabin. The movement stayed out of sight. By the time anyone passed along the road, there was nothing to see. In the afternoon, when the fog rolled in from the creek and visibility dropped to almost nothing, she moved the dirt. Bucket by bucket, load by load, through the back of the property to the water line. She didn't pile it, didn't leave a trace. She spread it thin along the bank where the current would take it. By evening, it was gone. No mound, no sign, no evidence that anything had been removed at all. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman cleaning her house, moving small amounts of dirt, tidying her land before the winter came. And that was exactly the point. The neighbors saw what they wanted to see. A widow with no timber, no crew, no chance. They assumed she had given up, that she was waiting for the deadline, the way a person waits for a storm they know they can't survive. And while they watched, the ground beneath her cabin began to disappear. She thought in volume, not surface. The cabin sat on a bed of compacted clay over limestone, stable, dense, predictable. 8 feet down, the temperature would stop changing, no matter what the air above did. Her father had taught her that, not as theory, as fact. The earth holds its own temperature. If you go deep enough, it stops caring about the weather. That meant something simple and powerful. If the horses were below that line, they wouldn't freeze. But that wasn't the only problem, because warmth didn't matter if something else found them first. Still, the space had to come first. She worked by candlelight at night, calculating between breaths. 3 horses, 12 feet wide, 20 feet long, 7 feet high, 1,700 cubic feet of earth. An impossible amount for one person, but not impossible for a miner's daughter. By the 5th day, her hands were already breaking. Blisters split open and hardened again. Layers of damage turning into something stronger. She stopped sitting down to eat, because standing back up cost too much time. She slept in short intervals, 2 hours at a time, because sleep was the only thing she couldn't move to the creek. Her body changed. Weight dropped. Her face sharpened. And every morning she went back under the floor, because every bucket of dirt removed was space gained. And that space was becoming something real. Not a hole, not a tunnel, a chamber. A place that didn't exist to anything above it. On the 7th day, someone noticed. She was at the creek dumping another load when a voice came from behind her. "You're setting those stones wrong." She turned, fast, hand already moving toward the shovel. A man sat on a rock 10 feet away, old, still, watching. His eyes didn't look at her, they looked at the stones. "The flat faces go inward," he said. "The rough ones out." He paused, then added quietly, "Ogden taught you that." The world shifted, just slightly. 7 days of silence. 7 days of perfect hiding. And now, someone could see it. Not the hole, not the dirt, the method. And that was worse, because methods don't lie. Clara didn't answer, didn't move, because in that moment the problem had changed again. She was no longer just racing the deadline. She was racing who might understand what she was building. He didn't ask what she was doing. That was the first sign. A man who asks questions doesn't understand. A man who speaks in corrections already knows. He took a slow drink, then set the bottle beside him. "I owe Hale money," he said. $40. "If he learns I helped you, he takes my shack." He let that settle. "Still, I owe your father more." Clara didn't move, but something shifted. Her father's name had weight, the kind of weight that doesn't fade with time. "He carried me out of a collapse," the man said. 300 yards in the dark. Didn't put me down once. Silence. Then, "You're building right." Not a compliment, a statement, the kind her father used to make. For the first time since the digging began, she wasn't alone. The man's name was Jonas Pike, and he didn't offer to stay, didn't offer to watch her back, didn't pretend this was anything more than what it was. "One night," he said, "when you set the ceiling, you'll need another set of hands." He stood, picked up the bottle. "And after that, you never saw me." She nodded once. That was enough. Because some agreements don't need words. 5 days later, the second problem arrived. Not quiet, not careful. Evan Cole rode straight up to the cabin like a man who believed he had the right. He didn't dismount immediately, just sat there, looking. At the ground, at the paddock, at the cabin. Measuring. The horses weren't there, not anymore. She had already moved them 1/2 mile east into the brush, out of sight, but not out of danger. "Where are they?" he asked. "Grazing," she said. He didn't believe her, not fully, but he didn't have proof, so he did what men like him do. He looked for something small, something careless, something human. He stepped off the horse, walked to the window, and looked inside. Everything was in place, table, chair, floor, except for one thing: a smear. Dark clay pressed into the grain of the wood, small, almost nothing, but wrong. "Why is there mud on your floor?" he asked. "Spilled water," she said. He held her eyes, longer than necessary. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but he understood that something didn't fit. Before he left, he delivered the message. "Inspections on the 22nd. No barn. They take the horses." He paused. "If you've hidden them, that's a federal violation." Then he rode off. And just like that, the timeline changed. It wasn't just a deadline anymore. It was suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than cold. That night, Clara scrubbed the floor. Not once, not twice, until the wood was clean, down to the grain. And when she was done, she didn't stop. She checked every board, every crack, every place a trace could hide, because now the system had to be perfect. Not just in the ground, but above it. On the 14th night, Jonas returned. No announcement, no warning. Just a shadow in the doorway at 2 a.m. They worked by lantern light beneath the floor. The chamber was ready, the walls packed tight, the space carved clean. Only one thing remained: the ceiling. Stone, not wood, because wood bends, wood rots, wood fails. Stone locks. They built the arches the way her father had taught her, flat faces inward, rough faces out. Each piece angled toward a center point, pressure becoming strength. No nails, no iron, just gravity and geometry. Jonas held the keystone in place while she set the final supports. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the weight settled, and the arch held. Perfect. Snow, furniture, footsteps above. All of it would press down and only make it stronger. Jonas stepped back, looked up once, then nodded. Not approval, recognition. Before he left, he said one more thing. "Hale doesn't want your horses." Clara froze. "He wants your creek." The words landed, slowly, heavy. The only water in the valley that didn't freeze. The ordinance, the deadline, the pressure. It wasn't about livestock. It was about control. Jonas opened the door and stepped into the dark. "You're not just hiding horses," he said. You're holding something he can't take." Then he was gone. Clara stood alone above a chamber no one knew existed. The arches were set, the walls were holding, but the problem wasn't finished. Because hiding something underground doesn't make it invisible. Not to a wolf. Not when the scent is still rising. By the 16th day, the chamber was complete. The walls held. The arches locked. The air below was warmer than the air above. It should have been enough, but it wasn't. Because a horse doesn't disappear just because you hide it. It breathes, it sweats, it leaves a trail that doesn't stay on the ground. Scent. On a cold night, that scent rises. Not slowly, clean, direct, like smoke from a chimney. And a wolf can read that signal from miles away. Which meant everything she had built could still fail. Not from collapse, not from cold, but from being found. Her father had shown her this once, not in a mine, in a kitchen. A candle, a tunnel made of damp sand. He lit the flame and watched the smoke rise, straight up, visible. Then he closed the top, cut a second path, angled, leading somewhere else. When he lit the larger fire across the room, the smoke changed direction, pulled sideways, disappearing. The flame never went out. It just stopped existing to the outside world. That was the system. Not hiding the source, redirecting what it produced. Clara built the same principle underground. First, the air had to come in, not from above, from below. She laid a stone culvert 50 feet out from the cabin, buried, hidden beneath deadfall and brush. The tunnel sloped downward before it rose again. Cold air entered and dropped, trapped at the lowest point. By the time it reached the chamber, it had already changed, warmed by the earth, slowed, made usable. The horses would breathe that air, not the frozen wind above. But air going in was only half the problem. Air going out was everything. A vertical chimney would have killed them. It would carry their scent straight into the sky, broadcasting their location to every predator in the valley. So she built something else, a horizontal flue running through the earth at a slight incline, not toward the open air, toward the one place that could erase the evidence, her fireplace. The flue connected the chamber to the back of the hearth, sealed with clay and ash, hardened with heat. When the fire burned, it pulled, not just smoke from the logs, everything. Warm air, moisture, and the scent of 3 horses breathing below her floor, drawn into the flame, broken apart, buried under the smell of oak and pine. She tested it, first with sage, then bending, then vanishing, then with manure, sealed the floor, walked outside, waited. Nothing. No trace, no signal. The system worked. She checked everything, every day. The walls, the joints, the airflow. A strip of cloth held near the intake, watching which way it moved. Her hands followed the stone, feeling for the smallest shift. Nothing moved. Nothing failed. On the 18th day, she cut the final piece. The entrance. Not through the cabin. Too obvious. Through the brush, 30 yards behind it. A tunnel. Curved. Descending at an angle, just shallow enough for a horse to walk. No straight lines, no clear view. Sound dampened with sand and pine needles. Hidden. It was nearly finished. And that was when the ground gave way. Not a collapse, a slump. 4 feet of clay sliding inward, fast, heavy. It buried her to the waist. The lantern went out. Darkness, complete. She didn't scream. Air mattered more than fear. She dug with her hands, fingernails tearing, skin breaking. Each handful of earth, a small return of control. The weight shifted, then resisted, then shifted again. Time stopped meaning anything. Only movement, only pressure, only breath. 2 hours later, she pulled free, climbed back into the cabin, relit the lantern, and lay there on the floor, listening to her own breathing. The fear came then, not of the pain, of the realization. 6 inches deeper, 2 feet wider, and she would have died the same way her father had. Buried in something that should have held. She forced herself up, lowered the lantern back into the chamber. The walls were intact, the arches unchanged, not a single stone out of place. The system had been tested, and it had held. That was the moment everything changed. This wasn't memory anymore. It was proof. She reinforced the weak section, packed sand, set more stone. Then she finished the tunnel. 30 yards, curved, hidden. A path no one could see, a space no one could detect. On the night of the 20th day, she moved the horses. Not by force, by patience. A trail of grain leading into the dark. The buckskin went first, then the mare. The yearling stopped at the edge, refusing. Clara didn't pull, didn't push. She stepped into the tunnel, sat down, and waited. Because some things only move forward when they decide to. 15 minutes passed. Then a step, and another, until all three were gone. The chamber was sealed. The air was moving. The system was alive. Above ground, the paddock stood empty, and the scent was gone. On the morning of the 22nd day, the valley was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes before something is taken. Clara was already awake, fire lit, steady. Not for warmth, for the system. The draft moved through the hearth, pulling air, pulling scent, pulling everything that mattered away from the world outside. Above the floorboards, there was nothing. No horses, no sound, no trace that they had ever been there. Only an empty paddock and frost beginning to form along the fence. The wolves came first, drawn by instinct, by memory. They moved along the tree line, heads low, reading the ground. They circled the paddock, paused, confused, because the signal was gone. No scent rising, no trail to follow. 3 animals that had filled the air for miles now didn't exist. One of them stepped closer to the cabin, nose lifting, testing the wind. For a moment, it stood still. Then it turned and left. The pack followed. Not driven away, not defeated, just unable to find anything worth hunting. An hour later, Darius Hale arrived. Not alone. 2 men rode with him. No urgency, no doubt. He dismounted slowly, the way a man does when he already owns what he's come to take. His eyes went to the paddock. Empty. He frowned, just slightly. "Where are they?" he asked. "Gone," Clara said. It wasn't a lie. He walked the fence line, checked the ground. No tracks, no disturbance. The frost lay untouched. He turned toward the cabin, stepped inside. The room was warm, fire burning, nothing out of place. No movement beneath his feet, no sound, no smell. Just wood, fire, silence. He stood there longer than necessary, listening, trying to find something that should have been obvious, but wasn't. Finally, he stepped back outside, looked once more at the empty paddock, then at Clara. The certainty was gone, not replaced by doubt, by something worse, a question he couldn't answer. He mounted his horse, didn't threaten, didn't argue, because the law required proof, and there was none. 3 horses gone without a trace, no structure, no violation, no claim he could enforce. He turned east and rode away, this time without the certainty. Clara stood in the doorway until the sound of hooves faded. Then she closed the door, walked to the center of the room, and knelt. Her hand rested on the floorboards for a moment. Then she lifted them. Warm air rose, slow, steady, carrying the quiet sound of 3 animals breathing, alive, safe, unreachable. She replaced the boards, stood, and fed the fire, because the system only worked as long as she did. Outside, the valley returned to silence. The wolves had moved on. The men had nothing to take. And beneath a cabin that looked like every other cabin, something existed that no law, no predator, and no man could touch. Not because it was hidden, but because it had been built in a way the world above could not understand. And that made all the difference.